I need your undivided attention for a story that will change the way you look at the phone in your hand. A story about a voice, a crime, and a choice that meant everything. If you stick around to the end, I promise you won't regret it. I hated the cubicle farm, the stale air, the fluorescent hum that felt like a permanent migraine, the endless script of cheerful apathy. My name is Jasmine, and for 9 hours a day, 5 days a week, I was a conduit for disappointment, peddling premium warranties for home appliances I couldn't afford myself. My workspace was grey, my soul felt greyer, and the only colour in my life was the blinking red light on my headset that signalled yet another mandatory call. It was a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday where the coffee was weak and the prospects of human connection was zero when the pattern broke. The system routed a call to me, a standard 1-800 number, but the voice that answered was anything but standard. It wasn't the usual grunt, sigh, or clipped not interested. It was quiet, deep, and laced with a weariness that cut through the background static of my own monotonous existence. "Hello, thank you for calling Mega Cover," I began, the words automatic, lifeless. "How may I help you today?" There was a pause, longer than usual. I checked the screen. The number was blocked, which was odd for an inbound business line. "I don't think you can help me with what I need, Mega Cover," the voice finally replied, the cadence slow, thoughtful, but I had to call someone, anyone. I frowned, lifting my hand to signal to my supervisor, Mark, who was prowling the aisles, that this was going sideways. "Sir, I understand, but if this isn't about your appliance warranty, I'm afraid I have to terminate the call and route you to the correct department." "No," he said, the single word sharp, a plea disguised as a command. The command was chilling. It held the unnerving certainty of a man used to taking control, even when facing absolute failure. "Don't hang up, please. Just stay on the line. I just need to hear a neutral voice, a human one. I need to know the world is still turning normally somewhere." His honesty was unnerving. More than that, it felt like bait. Mark gave me a frantic wrap-it-up gesture. I lowered my voice. "Sir, who is this?" "Call me August," he whispered. "And I'm not calling about a warranty. I'm calling from a place where the world has stopped turning, and I am being watched." My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a joke. His voice held a raw, palpable fear, but beneath the fear, there was an almost predatory intelligence, a way of drawing me in and locking the door behind me. I'd been trained for complaints, not confessions. "Watched by whom, August?" I typed a note into the system. "Potential disturbed caller. Attempting de-escalation." This would buy me time. "Watched by shadows, Jasmine. They're everywhere now. They know who I am and what I took. And they are closing in." He knew my name. I hadn't given it yet. "How do you know my name?" I asked, trying to sound calm, professional. A dry chuckle scraped across the line. "You have a lovely voice, Jasmine, and you repeat it a lot. Thank you for calling Mega Cover. My name is Jasmine. It's the only pleasant sound I've heard in days. It's also the key, isn't it? The perfect, ordinary sound to disguise a desperate act." That first call lasted 17 minutes, until Mark descended on me, snatching the headset. The line went dead before I could even say goodbye. But it wasn't the last call. The next day, precisely at 2:05 p.m., the blocked number flashed again. I grabbed it before anyone else could. Every time the light blinked red, it wasn't excitement. It was a cold lance of panic. "Jasmine," I breathed, skipping the script entirely. "August, you called back." "I told you I needed to hear the world turning," he murmured. "And your voice, it sounds like sunlight filtering through dust. It's safe. You are my lighthouse, Jasmine, and I am steering directly toward your light, regardless of the rocks." Over the next 2 weeks, the calls became an obsession, always between 2 and 3 in the afternoon during the lowest slump of the office day. I started slipping into an unused broom closet or the dim back stairwell, shielding the phone with my body, adrenaline humming through me like a tuning fork. The fear was constant. The fear of Mark firing me, the fear of my own moral collapse, and the growing, paralyzing fear that the shadows August spoke of would eventually trace the call back to me. I was becoming an accomplice simply by listening. He never spoke about the warranties. He spoke about poetry, about the smell of rain in the city, about the kind of music that could break your heart, and about the crushing silence of his current isolation. I learned he was highly intelligent, witty, a former architect who loved jazz and hated cilantro. He learned I dreamed of quitting telemarketing and writing novels, that I preferred the sea to the mountains, and that I was utterly, profoundly lonely. Sometimes I would press the phone away from my ear, staring at the scarred concrete, and ask myself if this entire interaction was a delusion, a brilliant performance staged by a sociopath to draw a witness into his warped reality. But then he would say something devastatingly beautiful, and my guard would crumble. We built a world, the two of us, constructed entirely of words and whispered secrets, a sanctuary on a fragile wire. The romance wasn't in touch or sight. It was in the intimate sharing of our innermost selves, the knowledge that we were each other's only true confidant. "What do you look like, August?" I asked one humid afternoon, leaning against a cold concrete wall, the smell of industrial cleaning fluid strangely comforting. "Like a ghost, probably," he said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming husky. "Tired. Worn. But once I was told I had hands built for drawing, Jasmine, and eyes that could be dishonest in the best way. They can calculate risk and mask the intent behind them perfectly." I closed my eyes, picturing the artist's hands, strong, capable, perhaps tracing the curve of a forgotten blueprint, or maybe the line of my jaw. "I bet your eyes aren't dishonest at all," I whispered back. "I bet they are the only honest thing left in the world." The flirtation was subtle at first, masked in intellectual sparring. Then it deepened, becoming sensual, a language of anticipation. We talked about textures, the way rough linen felt against sun-warmed skin, the slick coolness of marble, the softness of a worn leather chair. These were metaphors I knew for things we couldn't say, couldn't risk. But the subtext was thick, heating the air around me. One day he described a perfect moment of stillness, sitting alone watching a storm break. "I wish you were here, Jasmine," he said, the sound so close it felt like a breath against my ear, despite the distance. "I'd make you forget the grey dust of your office. I'd show you the real colors of the storm, and I'd want to see the color of your skin under the lightning, just for a moment." My breath hitched. I felt a flush spread from my neck to my cheeks. This was dangerous. This was reckless. But I craved the danger. "August," I managed, my voice trembling slightly. I have to get back. Mark will notice." "No, wait," he insisted, his voice suddenly commanding, pulling me back to the moment. The command was absolute, the voice of a man accustomed to having his needs prioritized, even in desperation. "Tell me one thing. If you could have one touch right now, what would it be? Just one, pure, selfish touch." I hesitated, looking around the empty stairwell. The temptation was overwhelming. "Your hands," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "I want to know if they feel like an architect's hands. Strong, steady, but maybe a little calloused from holding onto things too tightly." He took a slow, deep breath, and I could hear it, clear and sharp. They are exactly like that. And if I had one touch, Jasmine, it would be to cup your face, trace the line of your cheekbone with my thumb, and just wait for you to lean into it. I'd wait for that sound you just made. That beautiful, broken sound. That night I couldn't sleep. The 10% was not in vulgarity, but in the exquisite torture of imagination, the mental portrait I was building of this man, the intensity of our shared secrecy. The connection was undeniable, a physical ache of longing for a man I had never seen, whose existence I could not confirm, a phantom lover made real only by his voice. I found myself checking the news, searching for any high-profile case involving a missing architect. Nothing. He was good at being gone. The anxiety, however, was also deepening. His fear, once an abstract concept, started manifesting in my own life. I began looking over my shoulder, checking locks, convinced that the shadows he spoke of might somehow track him through me. He was getting more desperate. His calls were shorter, his breathing more ragged. "They are changing their patterns," he told me, his voice tight with adrenaline. I saw a face in the crowd today. It was one of them. I had to run for blocks. I almost dropped the phone. His fear was a virus, and I was infected. August, you have to tell me where you are. I can help you. I can call someone. No police, Jasmine. Not the police. They are part of the problem. You don't understand the scope of this. It's too big. One Friday he called and his voice was flat, empty of the poetry and charm that had captivated me. It was just the bare bones of a terrified man, but it was also the voice of a man shedding a disguise. I can't do this anymore, Jasmine, he confessed. The guilt is crushing me. I have to tell you the truth. Everything. He told me about the project. A massive, illegal corporate data retrieval operation, an effort to expose a powerful global energy corporation, Obsidian Technologies, for systemic fraud that had ruined thousands of lives. He wasn't just an architect. He was a brilliant system analyst recruited to break into their central data vault. He was a cold, calculating professional spy playing the hero. I got the files, Jasmine, all of it, enough to bring them down and send CEOs to prison for life. I was supposed to deliver them and walk away, a hero. He paused, and the silence stretched, terrifying. But something went wrong, a guard. He wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't see him. I just reacted. I pushed him. He fell, Jasmine. He fell from the mezzanine. I reacted, Jasmine. My survival instinct overrode every other sense. I ensured he wouldn't stop me. It wasn't gentle. My knees buckled. I sank to the cold floor of the utility closet, the scent of ammonia suddenly overpowering. This wasn't just corporate espionage. This was manslaughter, a crime with irreversible consequences. A man I loved, a man of such exquisite sensitivity, was capable of taking a life. He was just a security guard, August, I whispered, tears blurring my vision. Was he? Is he alive? No, he choked out. He died instantly. I didn't mean to. It was an accident, but it doesn't matter. They framed it as a violent robbery. Obsidian hired private contractors, the Shadows, to get the data back and silence me. They made me a killer, Jasmine. And I am. I killed a man. The sanctuary we had built instantly collapsed. The sunlight filtered through dust was now stained with blood. My brilliant, sensitive August, the man who knew the precise moment to shift the tone in a piece of jazz, was a fugitive in a shocking crime, a crime that went far beyond selling a bad warranty. He was a killer, accidental or not. The decision was immediate and brutal. My job, my morality, the law, and the life of a stranger versus the profound, undeniable love I had developed for the voice on the other end of the line. I was now an accessory after the fact, simply by listening. The fear was absolute, but the loyalty was a terrible, beautiful tidal wave that swept away all reason. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice strangely steady, all the trembling gone, replaced by a cold resolve. "I can't tell you, it's too dangerous. I just needed you to know the kind of monster you've been talking to." "You are not a monster, August. You are a victim of a terrible moment and a man trying to expose a vast evil." I heard a strange noise in the background, a distant siren maybe. August cursed softly. "They're close. I have to move. I can't call you again, Jasmine. It's too risky. This is goodbye." Panic seized me. "No, wait. August, don't hang up. I choose you." The words tore out of me, raw and absolute. "I don't care about the crime. I care about the man who loves the rain and hates cilantro. I will help you, but you have to give me something. A clue. Anything." His voice softened, the deep, soulful sound returning for one final, desperate plea. He knew exactly what to say to secure my help, a desperate final act of emotional manipulation that I accepted willingly. "I have one last contact. A dead drop. A safe house my team set up, but they think I was compromised, so they haven't checked it. It's on the outskirts of the city, a place called the Old Mill District. There's an abandoned warehouse, number 14. The code to the outer door is the year I was born, reversed. I need the data to be secured, Jasmine, not me. The data, if you can get to it, if you can retrieve the drive before they do. They win or we win, it's all there." He gave me the year 1987. The code was 7891. "Go now, Jasmine, before I lose the signal. And thank you. Thank you for making me human again." The line clicked dead. That evening I called in sick. I didn't go home. I drove his description of the old mill district, a place of forgotten industry, rusted pipes and crumbling brick, into my GPS. I felt like I was moving through a dream, disconnected from my life, propelled forward by a love stronger than fear. I bought new clothes, dark and practical, and a heavy-duty pair of gloves. I withdrew every penny I had saved. This was no longer a game. It was an escape plan. It took me 2 hours to find Warehouse 14, tucked away behind a sprawling, overgrown rail yard. The air smelled of decay and damp concrete. My heart was a frantic drum solo against my ribs. The building was vast, silent, and intimidating. I typed 7891 into the rusting keypad. The latch gave a heavy mechanical groan and released. I slipped inside, and the door shut behind me with a deafening finality, plunging me into absolute darkness. The inside was cavernous, illuminated only by thin shafts of moonlight piercing the grimy windows high up. I pulled out the small tactical flashlight I had bought. The beam cut through the dust-filled air, revealing huge skeletal machinery draped in cobwebs. Where would a system analyst hide a server drive? Not in the open. I remembered his love for detail, his architectural mind. He would use the existing structure, exploit a flaw in the design. I scanned the floor for loose bricks, but the concrete slab was intact. I focused on the walls. One wall, newer than the rest, seemed hastily constructed. I tapped it. It was hollow, but the data couldn't be there. Too obvious. Then I looked up. High above, nestled into a steel girder that supported the roof, was a small, crudely welded metal box. He had used the height and the darkness. It was unreachable. Panic flared, but then I remembered my love for him, the feel of his voice in my ear. I found an old rickety metal ladder leaning against the far wall. It was heavy, covered in rust, and utterly unstable. I dragged it across the floor, the screeching noise echoing in the immense space, certain that I was announcing my presence to the entire world. I hauled it up against the girder, testing it cautiously. It held. Slowly, carefully, I climbed, my gloves gripping the cold. Flaking metal. The height was terrifying, the ladder swaying precariously beneath my weight. I reached the girder, my shoulder bumping against the hard steel. I shone the light on the box. It wasn't welded shut, but bolted with 4 thick screws. I didn't have a screwdriver. I felt around the box desperately, my fingers scraping against the rough metal. There had to be something. My fingers brushed against a small cylindrical object taped underneath the box. It was a sturdy multi-tool. August. He had planned this, anticipating every obstacle. Tears pricked my eyes. He trusted me. Working quickly, with the adrenaline-fueled focus of a diamond thief, I unscrewed the bolts one by one. The box dropped into my hands with a satisfying thud. Inside, nestled in foam, was a single state-of-the-art solid-state drive, the data. I tucked it deep into my inner jacket pocket, the weight a massive burden of responsibility. As I started my descent, a blinding set of headlights flashed through the gap in the doorway. The door was ripped open, sending a cascade of dirt and dust into the warehouse. 3 figures, large and menacing, stepped inside. They were wearing tactical gear, no uniforms, just the black, silent menace of the shadows August had warned me about. They were carrying flashlights that were infinitely brighter than mine. "Hands in the air!" a gruff voice commanded. "Don't move, lady! Drop the item!" They knew I had something. I froze on the ladder halfway down, exposed and vulnerable. I looked at the floor, then at the single heavy box in my hand. I dropped the empty metal box. It hit the concrete floor with a colossal clang, sending a shower of sparks and echoing deafeningly. The men flinched, momentarily distracted by the noise and the sudden darkness again, as I killed my own flashlight. In that split second of confusion, I acted. I slid the rest of the way down the ladder, ignoring the searing pain as rust cut into my legs. I rolled, tucking myself behind a massive dormant electrical generator. The men shouted, their beams wildly sweeping the floor. "Check the mezzanine! She's moving!" I knew I couldn't outrun them, not with the data. But August had mentioned the rail yard. I crawled on my belly across the dusty floor, shards of glass digging into my palms, toward a small broken side door near the loading bay. One of the men saw me. "There, loading dock!" I heard a rapid series of heavy footsteps closing in. I burst through the decaying door and sprinted blindly into the tangle of abandoned train tracks, the moonlight now my only guide. I ran faster than I thought possible, until my lungs burned and my legs felt like lead. I dove behind a rusted freight car just as the men cleared the door. They were methodical, terrifying. They spread out, communicating in clipped, professional whispers over their radios. I was trapped between two cars, the precious data drive burning against my chest. This wasn't how August and I were supposed to meet. Suddenly a hand clamped over my mouth, pulling me violently backward into the shadow between the cars. I stifled a scream, ready to fight, when a familiar scent of rain and old spices filled my nostrils. "It's me, Jasmine. Don't scream," the deep voice whispered directly into my ear. It was August. He was here. I leaned back into his solid, muscular frame, his body a sudden, shocking shield. I could feel his heart hammering against my spine, matching the frantic rhythm of my own. I finally saw him. His face was unshaven, his eyes haunted, shadowed by exhaustion. But they were the most beautiful, honest eyes I had ever seen. He was taller, broader than I had imagined, radiating a coiled, desperate energy. This wasn't the ghost he described. This was a man of flesh, blood, and immense danger. A man I loved. He held me tightly, one arm across my waist, the other covering my mouth, pulling me flush against his body, sharing his warmth and his fear. The proximity was overwhelming. The fear was intoxicating. In the midst of the chaos, the brief, intense connection was almost unbearable. His breath was warm on my skin. I could feel the tension of his muscles, the steady, rhythmic beat of his heart. It was the physical confirmation of the man I had only known as a disembodied voice. He was solid, real, and he smelled of the rain he loved. He pressed a kiss against my temple, quick and desperate. The brief, chaste touch felt like the most erotic moment of my life, a culmination of all our whispered intimacy. "I saw you on the security feed outside," he murmured, his mouth millimeters from my ear. I was waiting in the shadows. I knew they were coming. One of the shadows moved closer, his flashlight beam sweeping across the train cars. August pulled me deeper into the narrow gap, his body pressing mine hard against the cold metal wall. It was a purely protective move, yet utterly intimate. I could feel the heat of his skin through the thin fabric of his shirt, the powerful curve of his chest. It was a desperate, shared moment of life and death, and in that moment I knew I would do anything for him. His lips brushed my ear again. "Give me the drive, Jasmine. Now." I fumbled inside my jacket, pulling out the sleek SSD and pressing it into his hand. His fingers, strong and calloused, closed around mine for a fleeting second. That single touch was the confirmation of everything we had built. He slipped away from me, moving with the silent grace of someone who had spent weeks in hiding. "Stay here. Don't move. I'm going to draw them away." Before I could protest, he was gone, melting into the complex geometry of the rail yard. Moments later, I heard a crash, a stack of old wooden pallets tumbling down, and a shout, "He's over there, split up!" The shadows took the bait, their flashlights converging on the opposite side of the rail yard. I waited, heart pounding, listening to the cacophony of their pursuit. After what felt like an eternity, the sound faded into the distance. Silence returned, heavier than before. Then, a low whistle. 2 short bursts and 1 long. Our private signal established weeks ago, a joke about a terrible ringtone I once had. I crawled out from my hiding spot and followed the sound, weaving through the metal skeletons of the rail yard. I found him waiting beneath a broken water tower, leaning against the massive concrete base, a small, triumphant smile playing on his lips. "They're tracking the signal from a fake drive I tossed. They think they have the data. We have about an hour before they figure it out," he said, his voice calmer now, the fear subdued by relief. "I booked a flight, first one out of the country. A risk, but the only way. I made sure to book it under a dead man's identity. There's no room for sentimentality, Jasmine." He reached for me then, his architect's hands cupping my face just as he had promised. His eyes, the honest, beautiful eyes, searched mine. "You came for me, Jasmine. You risked everything for a voice on the phone." "I risked everything for the man in the dark," I corrected, my hands settling on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I pulled him close and we kissed. It was a desperate, urgent kiss, full of all the pent-up longing, the shared secrets, the mortal danger, and the absolute reckless commitment we had made to each other. It was the taste of victory and the fear of the future, all distilled into one overwhelming moment. The touch was electric, validating all the months of whispered fantasy. His strength enveloped me, his lips moving with a tenderness that belied the danger we were in. The intimacy we had built over the phone was now terrifyingly, gloriously real. We couldn't stay. We had to move. He had a plan, meticulous, detailed, born of desperation and brilliant strategy. He had arranged a meeting with a journalist he trusted, an old friend who could verify the data and release it globally before Obsidian could stop it. The ultimate goal wasn't just escape, but justice. We drove the long, silent highway toward the airport. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in colors I hadn't realized existed in my gray world, August turned to me. "We're not running away from justice, Jasmine. We're running towards it. We're going to release the data, expose them, and then we face the consequences together. The truth is our protection." He confessed the full story, the intricate web of corporate corruption that led to the accidental death. The guard had been corrupt too, working for Obsidian, but his death was still August's burden. But the evidence on the drive was undeniable. The energy company had knowingly polluted local water sources, leading to the deaths of several people, a crime far greater and more shocking than the guard's accidental fall. The risk was immense, but the moral obligation was clearer now. When the data was published hours later, the world erupted. The exposed fraud was staggering. Obsidian Technologies faced a global investigation. Their stock plummeted, and key executives were detained. August's crime, while still serious, was overshadowed by the scale of the corporate evil he had uncovered. His actions were seen not as a simple theft, but as a whistleblowing attempt gone tragically wrong. He served a brief sentence, minimal given the situation, for the unauthorized entry and the tragic accident, a time I spent writing him every day, every letter a continuation of our sacred phone calls. I waited, I wrote, I kept his sanctuary safe. 2 years later, he walked free. We met, not in a sterile office or a dusty warehouse, but on a quiet stretch of beach he had once described in meticulous detail, a place where the sea was the color of forgotten amethyst. He looked healthy, whole, his eyes clear and free of shadow. He still had the architect's hands, and he used them to cup my face, pulling me in for a kiss that was neither desperate nor hurried, but full of the steady, safe, beautiful reality of a life we had fought for. We never went back to the old life. He became a consultant for environmental justice firms, using his skills for good. I finally wrote my novel, a story about an ordinary person whose life is upended by an extraordinary phone call. We built our home, not on fear, but on the foundation of trust, forged in the grey silence of a telemarketing cubicle and the darkness of an abandoned warehouse. The phone was no longer a symbol of my isolation, but the instrument of our salvation. It was the voice on the other end of the line that saved me, not from the shadows, but from the silence of my own life. If you love this story and want to hear more like it, please hit that subscribe button. It truly means the world to us and helps us grow. And hey, while you're at it, let's aim for 50 likes on this video. Help us smash that goal.